Now, the South African Human Rights Commission kicks off the Gauteng leg of its ongoing investigative hearings into the July 2021 unrest. The Commission is mandated to investigate whether the constitutional right to life, security and the right to not have one's possessions seized were indeed violated. Now, more than 300 people died, mostly in stampedes in the violent looting that engulfed KZN and parts of Gauteng last year. From today, the Commission will hear testimony from community organizations, the commercial sector, as well as private security and state officials. So for more on the story, let's bring in the South African Human Rights Commission CEO, Advocate Tseliso, Thipanyane, who joins us via our video link this morning. Advocate Thipanyane, it's great to have you with us on the program. Thanks so much for coming on so early. And the second leg, which kicks off of the investigative hearings into the riots, kicks off in Gauteng. It comes amid the first leg, which was held in KwaZulu-Natal, and of course it comes after that expert panel report into the unrest emerged just a little earlier this year. How much of what you uncovered in the first leg and that expert panel report will feed into the Gauteng leg of these hearings?
Good morning to you and to your viewers. No, certainly the expert panel report does help us a lot. And of course, the information gathered from the first session will help us again. Because, like for example, today we'll continue with the Minister of Police. And later on, we'll have the Minister of Justice, I think, next week. And then we're getting community representatives from Soweto as well as Alex, and a few academics, and I think from Business Unity. And the mayor, I think, of Durban will also be on the stage this week or next week. So really, the idea again is still to try and understand what was the role played by the state in this tragedy, as well as, to come up with recommendations to ensure that this tragedy never happens again. And also address, issues around social cohesion, because what happened in Phoenix and around Pietermaritzburg, where there were certainly racial killings.
Yeah. Take us through some of the testimony that we heard during the KZN leg of the Human Rights Commission's hearings into the riots. I mean, you spoke to a broad range of people from shop owners, business owners, ordinary South Africans. What for you stood out in what you heard during those hearings?
Definitely the role of the state, especially law enforcement agencies, the police and the army and intelligence, will definitely be quite prominent, because the state has a responsibility to prevent crime from happening, but also to detect those who are behind criminal activities like this one, and make sure that those people are brought to book. But at the same time, we also need to understand, what led to many of our people getting involved in these issues of looting and violence. And whereas, we as a country were committed to certain values of respect for human rights, respect for the rule of law. So certainly, something went wrong somewhere, and it has to be fixed quite urgently. And of course, the report from the president does highlight also and confirm some of the things which we are picking up, that there was inadequate policing, and I think there's still inadequate prosecution, because we still have to see very prominent figures being brought to book for the role they played in this saga.
Yeah. I mean, the expert panel report that you just alluded to there, talks about a real failure in our law enforcement agencies, not only to predict what unfolded in those 8 days in July last year, but also to respond adequately to prevent the kind of loss of life and the loss of businesses and incomes that we saw over those 8 years, those 8 days, pardon me. The scope of your hearings as the South African Human Rights Commission, it's inquisitorial. What does that tell South Africans about how far your recommendations can go?
Well, as far as we are concerned, our recommendations are binding, and the state will have to implement those findings unless they take ours on review, which will be a bit weird, to say the least, in view of what is very clear to everybody, that there was a failure of policing. There's been inadequate prosecution, and people have lost over 350 lives. There were racial killings, and we've lost massive amounts of money to our economy. So these issues have to be addressed. And of course, our people did loot. People did lose their property. So it will be very strange. And what we expect is that the state must do what is meant to do, to protect our people and make sure that those who break the law are brought into the book, as well as upholding the rule of law. There was clearly a massive disrespect for the rule of law in our country. And these are constitutional values which we have to uphold if we want to ensure that our democracy is sustained going forward.
Yeah. My question was actually around, will your recommendations go as far? Because you've said it quite plainly now. There was a failure of policing in our country. So will your recommendations go so far as to recommend that certain people in those particular positions, I'm talking about the police commissioner, the police minister themselves, decision makers who didn't respond in the way that they needed to respond, whether they should vacate office? Would your recommendations go that far?
Well, it will really depend on what we pick up eventually. But one thing is very clear is that we'll say that there's been a failure of policing, and hopefully our report will identify exactly how far that failure went up to, and then the president then must take necessary decisions if that is required. Because,
I can predict the response from the police minister, the police commissioner. It'll talk about just a lack of personnel as a start. Just under 200,000 police officers on the streets of a country with a population of 60 million people.
Well, I don't want to preempt our findings, but all I can say is that whatever findings we make, we'll expect the state to respect and give effect. Section 180, one of the is very clear, that the organs of state have a mandate to protect the integrity of the commission, and therefore you cannot just ignore or disregard our findings unless you challenge them in court.
Advocate Thipanyane, before we let you go, the Gauteng leg kicks off today. How long do you reckon those hearings will proceed? And if I am an interested party who'd like to be part of the hearings, how do I go about doing that?
Well, they'll go for 2 weeks, and they are being streamed on live. And of course, due to COVID-19, there are some restrictions as to the numbers of people. But the hearings are public, are open to the media and everybody else, as long as the numbers are adhered to.
And if I'd like to testify?
People can safely watch this from TV or online streaming on YouTube.
Yeah. And if I'd like to actually testify at the hearings, can I still do that?
Under very, very exceptional circumstances, we've had a call, inviting the public to make submissions. We're also identifying a number of people to come. So our 2 weeks is already full.
Yeah.
It will have to be under very exceptional circumstances.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time here on the program, giving us a sense of what we can expect in the next couple of weeks as the Gauteng leg of those hearings kick off. Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane joining us there. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Human Rights Commission.